Also, I wanted to bring to your attention, as you know, I'm pretty up to date on politics. There is a bill that's being introduced in state legislatures across this country. They attempted to do it in Congress. It's called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA. Sounds like a reasonable idea, right? Well, no, it's not. It's a Trojan horse which would allow any individual or business to discriminate against anybody they don't like. So I really want to encourage you to contact your legislators and say, no, reject this ridiculous act, Religious Freedom Restoration Act. I did put, there was an editorial this morning, actually it was an opinion piece. I've got a copy of that on the bench out near my office by Rabbi Sandy Sasso. I sat next to him on a panel back a few years ago. As I said, I met him. And he kind of enumerates what it's all about. But I wanted you to be aware of that. You know, as we've talked about before, I don't endorse candidates, but I do talk about moral issues, and this is just a Trojan horse that would allow anybody to discriminate, and that's not what we're about. All right. Good morning. There was a Unity minister named Jim who lived outside of Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City, of course, is along Interstate 70 like we are, so it has very similar weather as far as, you know, good 4 seasons. Now, Jim decided to build a couple of lily ponds on his property, and he put goldfish into it. And, you know, it was just a nice place to go out and just, you know, meditate and that sort of thing. But then Jim got a couple of dogs. At one point, the dogs went chasing something into the lily ponds, and they tore the liners of the lily ponds, and so the lily ponds drained. It was late in the summer, and Jim was kind of like, well, you know, I don't want to put a lot of work into them right now since I'm going to be having to drain them anyway. So he gathered up all of the goldfish and gave them away, you know, and drained the ponds, and figured I'll take care of them next year. So, you know, there was some rain that fall, so about 3 inches of rain, you know, got in the lower portions of the pond, and then of course the winter came, all of the water in the pond, you know, froze solid. Then of course there'd be a thaw and it would evaporate, and you know how it is. I mean, just, you know, you see it here, you know, in Indianapolis. So one March day, about this time of the year, he came home on Sunday, and he just had this feeling, well, you know, I'm not going to be able to rebuild the ponds for a little bit, but I'm just having this feeling that I should go out and look things over, take some measurements. I might want to make some changes. So he walked down to what he thought were empty lily ponds, and sure enough they were. He looked at the big one first, took some measurements. They went over to the smaller one, and he said, you know, there are a couple of low-lying areas where there was just kind of this kind of moist muck in these little pockets. And all of a sudden something catches his eye, you know, it's kind of reflecting off the sun. And here, in the middle of this muck, is a 3-inch reddish goldfish. And he's like, whoa, wow, like, you know, like you just said. And he comes and takes a closer look at it, and it moved. And he ran back to the house, and he got a glass of water, and he came back out, and he picked up the fish, and it gasped, and he put it in the glass of water. Took it back up to the house. Now he noticed that it didn't go belly up like goldfish usually do when they're dead, so even though it wasn't moving very much, he could tell that it was alive, and he kept track of it. Then he transferred it into a larger bowl. He noticed that one of its fins had been damaged, and one of its sides, you know, had some, you know, just scarring on it or whatever. And for about 3 days, the fish just kind of chilled out. But then all of a sudden the fish just came to life, and Jim said it was amazing watching this fish in the following weeks. He says, I've never seen a fish so alive, moving around like, hurrah, I made it! And he rebuilt the lily ponds and put the water in. He says, and the first thing he did, of course, was take that lone goldfish out and put it in the pond. He says, that fish would dart around. It was kind of like, you know, just enjoying life, probably more than any other fish he'd seen, or for that matter, like he said, any other person he'd seen. But of course, you know, the mind tries to start explaining these things, and Jim's like, you know, how did this thing survive, or did it survive? It was a hatched egg. And as he's coming up with all of these questions, which he realized he'd never get an answer to, he finally let go. The minister named Jim was James Dillett Freeman. He's the minister who wrote the Prayer for Protection. He was Unity's poet laureate, passed away about 12 years ago. But he wrote an article for Unity magazine called "A Fish Not Even Gold." And this is a portion of it. What a fuss to make about a fish, you might be saying, and a ridiculous coincidence. But I also am such a fish, not even gold. I live in a pond that is also perilous, precarious. It too has had many times of freezing and thawing, of wetness and drying out. And like my fish, I too am here, I feel, because I have called. And the feet of the world have been no less swift when they ran to feed me. We are all linked to one another. We answer, though we have heard no voice. We respond, though we do not know we have been summoned. And the universe responds to us with powers you could not think were there, by ways you could not think were there, by ways you had no foresight of, bringing help you could not know would come. Isn't that neat? You know, and he realized, you know, reflecting on it, wow, I had this intuition that I needed to go out and look at those ponds. You know, and I found that fish. You know, could it be that that fish just recognized that it needed help and sent out a signal that I was able to pick up? You know, have you experienced anything like that? Well, what Jim experienced and what you experienced, there's actually been scientific proof of. You know, scientists who study atoms have noticed that when there's two atoms that are adjacent to each other, when you take them apart, if you change the electrons on the one atom, the other atom changes the electrons too. There seems to be a connection, you know, between every particle of the universe. And we are, of course, are particles of the universe. I've used the analogy many times that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves. You know, from the old tradition, we're all cells in the body of Christ. Now, you know that you have all of these various cells in your body. You have cells that make up your fingernails, your flesh, your bones, the fluid in your eyes, your blood. They're all different kinds of cells, but they communicate with each other. If you prick your finger, you notice how every other cell in your body knows it and will do what it can to help it? So, Pam Grout, of course I haven't mentioned the book yet. We're reading the book E² by Pam Grout. It is available in our bookstore and gift shop. We just got 2 weeks left, you know, this Sunday and next Sunday. If you weren't here on a previous Sunday, don't worry, I've encapsulated each lesson as itself, but if you do want to hear or see the previous lessons, they're available on our website on the audio and video files tab, or you can request a CD in the bookstore. Now, Pam goes to the Unity Church in Lawrence, Kansas, and she got this idea. She was a successful writer and screenwriter. What if I were to try to embody some of these principles that we know and explain them to somebody who's skeptical about church, maybe agnostic? Give them 9 concrete experiments they can do to prove that we all are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so she came up with these experiments. And you know, one of the things she says in the book is that what quantum physicists have noticed, of course, is when you have the adjacent atoms, that they're always connected. So when you meet other people especially, or especially when you shake their hands or touch them in some way, there's a connection there that always is there with you, that you can kind of sense that something else is going on. There's a disturbance in the force. So this 8th chapter, this 8th experiment is called the 101 Dalmatians Principle. The premise: we are connected to everything and everyone else in the universe. Now, the original animated movie 101 Dalmatians came out in 1961, and I remember seeing it when I was age 5, you know, and of course, you know, like so many Disney movies, you know, kids obsess about it for about a year. You know, it's kind of like right now, every kid, you know, just obsesses over Frozen. But, so we had the 101 Dalmatians, and of course they made a live-action remake of it in 1996 with Glenn Close as the lead protagonist, or antagonist, rather. But the idea is, it's told from the perspective of dogs. And so you've got this couple of Dalmatians, and they give birth, to many other Dalmatians, a total of 101 Dalmatians. And in the story, there is an evil woman who comes and wants to buy some of the puppies. So she wants to buy 15 of the puppies. And they're like, wow, that's a lot of puppies. Why do you want those puppies? And they're like, well, I want to make a fur coat out of them. I like the way Dalmatian fur looks. And so they refuse. But the evil woman, Cruella de Vil, decides to send 2 henchmen to steal 15 of the puppies. And so the adult Dalmatians are frantic, and of course the couple that owns them notices that some of the dogs are gone. They go to the police, there's nothing really we can do. And so the dogs start to communicate with other dogs. The twilight bark, as it's called. And we've all experienced it, that where you're out there, on a summer night especially, and you hear dogs barking. And it's kind of like, what are they barking at? Well, the premise in the movie is that they're communicating with each other. So they put out an alert. 15 puppies have been stolen, and the alert is passed along to other dogs in the city. This takes place in London. It was actually based on a novel from 1956. And then it gets to the outskirts of town, and it's put out into the country. And then there's a dog out there that hears it and recognizes that, oh yeah, the neighbor on the nearby farm, Cruella de Vil, came home with 15 puppies, and the movie continues. But we do have that aspect of being able to communicate with each other. There's a telepathic energy that we all have. Now, if you've come to Unity, odds are you're an intuitive person. We're all actually intuitive, but we're awake to the fact that we're intuitive. I know Carla and I, as close as we are, we can just about read each other's thoughts. And it's scary. No, I'm kidding. But we have a connection there, and we know. I mean, just the other day, Carla was trying to get a hold of me. I had left my cell phone in the office and was away from the desks elsewhere in the church, and I just had this feeling that Carla was calling, and sure enough, she was. But even if you don't know a person that well, say you go into a room or you're at a party, can't you intuitively know if someone doesn't like you? And can't you know when somebody does like you? There are so many spiritual lessons about this in the Bible, letter to the Ephesians, 4th chapter, 31st verse. The writer says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander and malice be put away from you. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another." There's this amazing concept that I speak of from time to time about forgiveness. We have to recognize that we all have preferences, ways we prefer things to be. But a lot of times life doesn't go that way, does it? But can we accept what is given to us and recognize, okay, what's the good in this? What's the lesson here? Jesus, of course, had a lot of lessons on this. Gospel of Matthew, 18th chapter, 21st verse. "Then Peter came up and said to him, 'Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I have to forgive him? As many as 7 times?' And Jesus answered him, 'I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Now, the symbolism of the number 7 means completion at the physical world level. And when you add a 0, it means for as long as it takes. And it's probably going to take a little longer. For those of you who can't do math in your head, 70 times 7 is 490. Have you forgiven 490 times during your lifetime yet? But the key is that sometimes when there is a situation where someone has done something I prefer they had not, it becomes a bit of a challenge to forgive them. But you put that possibility, that intention in your mind that yes, this is going to happen. And sure enough, sometimes it's like peeling away an onion, but suddenly it's there. And the way you test yourself is, can you recall the incident without reliving it? Can you recall the incident and say, oh yeah, that happened, but I learned a wonderful spiritual lesson from that. I saw the good in it. That's what 70 times 7 is all about. And I love the way Peter puts it. How often shall my brother sin against me and I have to forgive him? You know how that is. I mean, you had someone in your life like that probably, right? I mean, they are a special gift to you, an angel to teach you unconditional love. Isn't it funny, though, how we always want to have some sort of condition to that love? I don't know anyone, including myself, that has truly expressed unconditional love. We have at times, maybe even the majority of the time. Now, there was a woman who suffered a terrible injustice years ago. The woman's name is Shirley MacLaine, the actress. And as you know, Shirley is very connected to the New Thought movement, and, the unity philosophy. But of course, she's a celebrity, a well-known actress, and occasionally she gets slapped with frivolous lawsuits. And she got slapped with a frivolous lawsuit. And she said to her lawyer, it's like, no, I am not caving into this, we're going to take this to court. And this thing dragged on and on and on, and no matter what they would do, they couldn't settle, they had to go to court. And then at the court, Shirley had a realization of what I was just talking about a moment ago. It's like, what am I doing? I'm getting all caught up in having a tug of war with this person. You can't have a tug of war if one person lets go at the end of the rope. So I'm going to let go at the end of the rope. And she started realizing the stuff that this had brought up for her. And wow, yeah, I have gotten a spiritual lesson from this. And she even found herself at that point shifting to, rather than feeling anger, rather than feeling fear, to just sending out love, even though she wasn't in the same room, as the guy at the time. And so she just sent out love. And it was their day in court, and the other attorney approached their attorney and said, my client says he'd like to settle. And as the day wore on, what Shirley discovered was the settlement was something very easily that she could agree to. But here she had been all caught up in this injustice, rather than, okay, well, wait a minute, where's the good in this? And once she made that shift, then suddenly the world experience shifted. In 1972, there was a new phrase added to the world's lexicon. It was a presentation at the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, the AAAS. They put out a wonderful magazine, too, of the latest discoveries in science. One of the presenters was Edward Lorenz, and he talked about the butterfly effect. He said the concept was, could it be that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, that the reverberations, the vibrations off of those wings could cause a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico hitting Texas? And so this concept was put out there that sometimes something very small, a very small gesture or thought can indeed change everything around it. And that's true, of course, of positive, negative, of pleasant and unpleasant. We can put out this energy. So the 101 Dalmatians principle is that we're all connected, and that we can all send out a message. So the question Pam Grout asks in the book is, can I send a message without being in that person's presence? So that's the experiment for this week. Can I send a message without being in that person's presence? So what she suggests is, during the next 2 days, telepathically send a message to a specific person, and then you'll get evidence that he or she has received it. Number one, choose your target. Now, this should be somebody that you know, someone that you've met, maybe shaken hands with, touched. I mean, the key here is, if I were to send a telepathic message to Jennifer Lopez that I want her to call me, what are the odds that Jennifer Lopez is going to call me? But but choose someone. Maybe someone you haven't seen for a while or that you've had some friction with. Now you send out this telepathic message. Number two is choose what kind of action or response you want. Be specific and clear about your agenda. And by that is that, do you want a phone call, do you want a letter, an email? What would be your evidence that they've received the message? And in the book, Pam Grout mentions the one woman says, I just want to get calls from men. And she said her phone rang constantly, wrong numbers, middle of the night. Just as you have to be specific about who you want it from and what the agenda is. Number 3, place your target in front of your mind's eye. And that way, just use your imagination. Really see that you're with this person. Number 4, be with your target, embodying and experiencing your connection. Just as words are almost the most ineffective in this situation. And that is that sense of just, in your imagination, feel your connection. And just send that message. Just picture that message getting across to this person. This has been proven scientifically, too. They've had someone on the West Coast send a message to, say, someone on the East Coast, and it works. And number 5, shower your target with good thoughts. Send them incomparable blessings, as she says. Just send love, peace, joy, like we were talking about a few weeks ago. So that's your experiment. And then choose 48 hours. Note your start time, and then see what happens over the 48 hours, the 2 days that follow. I telepathically send a scientific message, or a specific message, to a specific person, and I will get evidence that he or she received it. That's the assignment. Now, our closing story is a 3-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News. Now, 9 months ago, I showed you a video of a man in his 40s who had been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And rather than get angry about it or brood about it, he decided he was going to live his life to the fullest from that point forward. And the first thing he did was he put out the meme in his hometown of Durham, North Carolina, that he was going to steal a truck from Krispy Kreme Donuts and give out donuts for free. And Krispy Kreme Donuts found out about it and basically cooperated with him and let him pass out donuts for free. And that story touched so many people that a few weeks later, a filmmaker approached him and wanted him to interview other people with ALS and give their insights as to what they're discovering about life and forgiveness and living life to the fullest. Well, he did something again. So Steve Hartman visited him again and see if this doesn't connect with what we've been talking about.
It's always been a mystery to me how someone not long for this world could care so much about it. Even now, his voice almost gone, Chris still has a lot to say about how to make the world a better place. His latest revelation is about the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is this idea that a single butterfly flapping its wings on one side of the globe can, in theory, start a hurricane on the other. It's a physics concept, but Chris wondered if it could be applied to kindness as well.
An act of kindness, how far could it go?
A few months ago, he decided to test the theory at this diner in his hometown of Durham, North Carolina. He saw 2 girls at the table next to his and gave them each $50 with one very simple instruction: do something kind.
And then we left.
That was the end of it?
Yeah. And I forgot all about it.
Until?
We got this email.
It included pictures from a village in Africa with people holding signs that read, "Thanks a lot for spreading kindness, Chris Rosati."
It was the butterfly effect.
The 2 girls responsible were 13-year-old Kate Cameron and her 10-year-old sister Anna. They say they couldn't believe it when a stranger gave them each $50.
You didn't want to let him down.
No, that makes you want to do something good with that money. Yes.
The girls say they already knew about this village in Sierra Leone where their dad had worked in the Peace Corps. They knew the people there had been working hard to fight Ebola. So the girls paid for a feast to help them celebrate being Ebola-free. They say it felt great to help.
It's inspired me.
I would definitely encourage other people to do it.
Now that it's proven, what do you do?
Oh man. You get a whole lot of butterflies that flap their wings.
To that end, last month, Chris Rosati, who's already done so much for North Carolina, launched his latest campaign. He told these screaming fans his plan to give out hundreds of little butterfly grants, $50 each, to any kid who wants to start changing the world. America, get ready for a hurricane. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Durham, North Carolina.
From the letter to the Ephesians, 4th chapter, 31st verse. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander and malice be put away from you. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. May you always be open to God's guidance and grace. It's now time for tithes and offerings. This is a wonderful spiritual lighthouse. We celebrated our 100th anniversary last year. Recognize how many people have indeed paid it forward. The butterfly effect of those people when 1914 they got together to form this spiritual community. Now, just take what it is you're going to give today. Even if it's a penny. If you give electronically, on the website, on the donation tab, just hold the amount you give there in your mind. Open your heart for love, peace, and joy. This is what it is you're going to give today. See it multiply. And whatever we give unconditionally comes back as multiplied at least 100 times. So we're sending out the butterfly. And now let's say the affirmation on the screen together. Divine love, through me, bless us